PharmaTelevision News Review here at the SACS conference in Basel in September 2016. On this show, I have Ian Nicholson, who is CEO of a company called F2G. Welcome.
Thank you, Fintan. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. You've got an interesting company which is very specialized in the area of antifungals or fungal disease.
Yes, it is.
You're a private company. You've done a huge financing recently. Let's just dissect that a little bit, first of all. Fungal disease, the development of antifungal molecules and so forth, therapeutics. Traditionally, that's been considered to be a reasonably satisfied industry or a target, but because of immunocompromised patients, etc., that is becoming an increased problem.
Well, there's a number of factors that play into this. I mean, the first is that you're right, the number of immune-compromised patients by dint of chemotherapy and the increased use of solid organ transplantation, HIV patients, of course. There's a growing patient population out there, but the real driver behind it is the fact there's not been any new agents for the last 20 or 30 years in this particular high mortality indication. And that is a problem because the existing agents are generally poorly tolerated. So roughly between 10% and 30% of patients don't tolerate the first therapy they get given. And don't forget, this is a very serious invasive fungal disease which is treated in an ICU setting to start off with.
Yeah, and that leads to death.
Yes, and the mortality rates are extremely high in this indication. And then bolted onto that, and a very important, increasingly issue of concern is that of resistance. Very much akin to antimicrobial resistance, we're now seeing resistance building in the antifungal arena. And for example, resistance to the main standard of care class of therapy, which is the azoles, voriconazole, posaconazole, itraconazole, is growing significantly. So that in Northern Europe now, let's say the Netherlands, for example, resistance rates are over 25%. So 1 in 4 patients is resistant, has a bug that is resistant to the standard of care. And that means that there's a huge need for novel agents, very much as there is in some of the antibiotic areas. And we have a novel class of agent which lacks that cross-resistance. So what clinicians are looking for is an agent that can overcome resistance and is safe and well tolerated.
So what's different about your novel agents? What differentiates them from the other approach, the azole approach?
Well, first of all, as I say, there's been no novel classes of drug in this area for at least 20 years. Our agent is based on a novel target, first of all. It's a novel chemical series against a novel target. The target is fungal DHODH, and you may remember that there's certain drugs already on the market against the human DHODH enzyme. We don't hit that, we hit specifically the fungal enzyme, and that differentiates us and gives us a basis to think that we can overcome the resistant strains that are out there. And in fact, we've done a lot of animal model work with those azole resistant strains, showing that we can treat them very effectively with high potency. So our view is that with a novel class against a novel target, we'll be able to address that resistance concern and at the same time have an agent that's better tolerated than the existing agents. And just by way of exemplifying that, we've now been in over 200 human subjects and we've shown a very good tolerability profile.
So that obviously means you're in phase 1.
We're finishing off phase 1 right now, and we're about to start phase 2 in the next few weeks. That's a short phase 2 program, and that leads on to our regulatory strategy, which I'll come on to in a minute. And that's a short phase 2 program, which is really a PK study, demonstrating that the PK we've seen in healthy subjects is the same as it is in at-risk patients. So this is an at-risk patient population.
Right.
And we are now, I think it's true to say, being encouraged by the regulators to bring the agent forward as quickly as possible. And that's exemplified by the fact we've been selected by the EMA for the adaptive pathway licensing approach, which means both with the FDA and the EMA, we should be able to get conditional approval on the basis of a limited data set. We've already agreed the structure and nature of that study with the regulators. And instead of having to run a 600 patient traditional phase 3 study, we are able to run a 200 patient randomized controlled phase 3 study basically to get the first approval, commercial approval. That means we'll probably have to run that larger study, but later on, once we're on the market.
Right. Okay, that's interesting, because it comes back to the financing and how you run that business model.
Yes.
And so forth. So one of the key things that you have just done recently over the summer is to raise 60 million US.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes.
How did you do that? And where did you get the money from?
Yeah, so I think the fact that the company is unique, we have a unique asset in an area of high unmet medical need, has brought us to the attention of investors. And in the US particularly, and quite a lot of that money has come from US investors, the infectious disease arena is really an area of interest because of resistance. People believe that there will be, and there is now, strong unmet medical need. And that commercial opportunity, I think, is now coming to the fore in terms of investors' minds. So we were able to go out with our story, with a novel asset in this very difficult to treat indication with high mortality, and persuade investors that we have a really unique opportunity to quickly get on the market with a very interesting agent.
Right.
And I think that was we were able then to attract Novo, Sectoral Asset Management, Aisling Capital, Brace Pharma Capital, in addition to our existing investors, Novartis Venture Fund, Advent, Merafin, Sunstone. And between those leading international investors, we were able to put together a 60 million financing to take us all the way to regulatory approval.
Which is interesting as well, because not all biotech companies want to do that or can't do that. Would be more likely.
Yes.
They'd love to do that, but they can't.
Yes.
And that's because of the unique regulatory side to your drug development.
Indeed, it makes it affordable for venture investors without the need necessarily to go into an IPO. Right. We may in the future seek an IPO, but that will be opportunistic rather than out of necessity.
Yeah, indeed.
So I think for us, we're in a very fortunate position now to execute on our plan to get the agent approved.
Right. So just go back to the origin of the business, because of the business, because the molecules, you're based in Manchester.
Yes.
So the science came out of the University of Manchester.
Yes, it was originally the company has an interesting history, and it goes back a long way to 1999, when it was really in the omics era, you'll remember. So this was a functional genomics company in the fungal arena, so functional fungal genomics F2G. And the company was built on developing and discovering novel targets for antifungals. That model, of course, as we all know, really collapsed in the early 2000s, and the company morphed into a drug discovery and development company at that point, using one of the original targets that had been discovered in-house. And all this work has been done in-house. So although it was a university spin-out, the company is now, as you know, independently financed by international venture finance.
Right. Now, in terms of the pipeline and portfolio, obviously you're going ahead with your first candidate.
Yes.
Are you backup compounds? How is that? How are you playing that out?
So the company, as I say, has evolved from a focus in antifungal disease. So in addition to the lead molecule, we have two research programs. One focused on a candida agent using a similar target of the class that we're using with the lead program, and then we have a completely novel target, and that we believe can give rise to a broad spectrum agent which will treat both the yeasts and the molds and be a broad spectrum antifungal agent. Whilst that's early, some of the early data we've received on that agent fairly recently is very encouraging. So we're pushing forward with that program, because again, that's another novel target and a completely new class. And it's been very difficult in the past to develop these broad spectrum agents. So we believe we may be onto something there.
Right. And so what sort of news flow can we expect? What sort of events do you see happening over the next couple of years, let's say?
Well, in the short term, we've applied for orphan drug designation and we're waiting to get confirmation of that. We will be completing our phase 2 study in the first quarter next year, and then we'll be preparing to start our phase 3 program in the middle of next year. And throughout that period, we'll have a lot of data coming out. We're making a lot of significant appointments in our clinical trial group to be able to support the clinical study. We'll do that through a CRO, obviously, but we need an internal infrastructure.
Sure.
And then as we come into 2018 and 19, we will have data from those studies, but we're running in parallel a study in a rare mold indication called invasive scedosporiosis, for which there's no known therapies right now. So there'll be news flow from that studies as well as from our research pipeline.
Right. Just one additional question really is, you've got a lot of US investors putting money in. They're comfortable with your location. Is there any sort of desire for them to move the company out of the UK into the US?
No, I think they see the company as being a highly innovative generator of novel assets in the antifungal arena. They don't wish us to move the company to the US. We remain open as to a NASDAQ IPO sometime in the future. That would be the natural home for us, on which there are a group of highly sophisticated investors, but also peer companies in the anti-infective space.
Sure.
So I think that would be our natural home. There's no pressure on us right now. As it turns out, the financing was closed 9 days before the Brexit vote emerged, so whether that would have had a bearing on it or not is difficult to say. But nevertheless, we were fortunate to get the financing closed and move on.
Yeah, I think just a remark on that. I don't think Brexit is going to affect things like that too much.
No, I don't think so either.
I mean,
I think it's a global business.
It's a global business. What's most important is what products you've got or you're developing.
Exactly. I think it depends on the asset. It's largely location independent, I think. And I don't think Brexit plays on that anyway. No.
And you've got the freedom to go onto NASDAQ anyway.
Exactly.
Or even go onto the AIM if you wish to.
Exactly.
But
I think NASDAQ would be the natural home. That would be the natural home for us.
Ian Nicholson, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show.
Fintan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
PharmaVentures, experts in deals and alliances.